Someone wants me up for a minute. And we'll- The dual screen is messing me up this evening, mostly because I don't know which side of my screen to move it to. All right, here we go. All right. Good evening, everyone.
Hi, Jamie.
Randy, do you want to call us to order and then I'll do roll call?
Yes. Welcome to the March meeting of the Conservation Commission. And I want to begin our time together with an acknowledgement honoring all Indigenous people, the people who came here before us and nurtured this place as stewards of Mother Earth, the first people. I make this acknowledgement aware that this land is unceded and that issues of water and territorial rights and encroachment upon sacred sites are ongoing in the Wabanaki homeland. I acknowledge the Waskawa people who once lived in what is now Scarborough, and that as we support efforts for land and water protection, we honor the current tribes who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. Thanks everyone for coming this evening, and welcome to our guests as well. Jamie, you want to take the role?
Sure. I'll start with those of us in person and then move to our virtual attendees. Randy Hogan.
Here.
Pete Slavinsky.
Here.
Emily Springer.
Here.
Chuck Stanger.
Here.
April Seither. Here. And we have two guests joining us, actually more than two, but Rita Breton and Marla Zando from Pmac. Hopefully this is the last time we have to say that, fingers crossed. And two members of the public are attending as well.
Maybe just quickly, the members of the public who are attending, are you hoping to speak to something specific tonight? Would you like me to give you time to speak now, or are you listening? Would you like to participate in the conversation? Give me a sense of how you would like to. Jamie's going to give you the ability to speak.
Yeah, so Andrew, go right ahead.
Hi, this is Andrew Mackey. I'm the Executive Director of the Scarborough Land Trust, and I'm here just to listen.
Always welcome. Thank you. And Buck, welcome. Okay. So Buck, you're muted. If you would like to speak now, you can unmute. Otherwise, we'll proceed. Okay. So Jamie, thank you for circulating the agenda and the minutes. Could we take a vote on the minutes? Or hear a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from last meeting.
Second.
Great. Jamie?
Yeah, Randy Hogan,
Yes.
Pete Slavinsky,
Yes.
Emily Springer,
Yes.
Chuck Stanger.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks. And then tonight's agenda, we are going to hear an update about the proposed consolidation of the Conservation Commission Pmac, where we are with that, the next steps. Again, the focus of our time together are on our 2022 goals, and with a focus on action items as we requested last time. And then we'll have an update on the community action grants, which Jamie's done a fabulous job of pulling us together and driving forward. And then updates as usual with a couple of additions on the update section. So the bulk of our time is going to be on 2022 goals. Any comments or other requests?
I just want to let folks know specifically the two updates that were added to the agenda were a town council workshop about Sawyer Street that's being held this Wednesday, and an update on Southern Maine Planning and Development Commission's Coastal Resiliency Project. We should be able to touch on both of those briefly. The Coastal Resiliency Project may be a little longer. If we don't get to it tonight, I'll share it as a written update after the meeting.
Thank you. So let's move to the first item under old business. Jamie?
Sure, Conservation Commission and Pmac Consolidation. So for those who haven't been following along, we went before the Council's Rules and Policy Committee on February 24th to review the proposed consolidation. As a reminder, this is the second council committee that has seen this proposal. The first was the Appointments and Negotiations Committee back at the beginning of February. The committee, their support of the Rules and Policy Committee was a bit mixed. They ultimately decided to move the process forward to the council. The first reading of the proposed consolidation will be at this week's town council meeting. And the second reading, public hearing and vote will likely be on April 6th. Yes, okay. April nodded her head in agreement. It would be helpful to have members of the commission and PMAC attend both of those meetings, either in person or virtually, if there are any questions, and just to show, even though we've provided lots of documentation showing that the two groups support this effort, just to physically show that there's support for consolidation. We wanna.
Jamie,
Yeah.
excuse me, when is this week's town council meeting?
It is Wednesday,
Wednesday?
the 16th at 7 p.m. And it does unfortunately look like we're towards the end of the agenda. So,
And, okay, thanks.
and I can send around the invitation and the Zoom link to everyone. I'll do that either later on this evening or first thing tomorrow morning for you all.
Okay.
Just as an aside, Counselor Anderson and I did try and sponsor doing a consolidated first read, second read, and waiving. And the process, unfortunately, the timeline for our request, we would have had to request that before it appeared on this week's agenda. And so I wasn't sure that it was going to appear on this week's agenda because I had been pushing Chairman Clutie about it. And so then, of course, by the time it was on the agenda, it was too late for Counselor Anderson and I to sponsor consolidating and getting rid of it. So we're still at that first reading, public hearing, second reading. And at this point, that's definitely going to be the process.
Thanks for trying.
Let's withdraw.
Yeah, seriously.
Marla?
Okay, I have a question about it. So this is on Wednesday night and I'm assuming you'll be there. And then you're a member of the town council, so you will be there. So it's not that you need anybody to speak in favor of this. You just think
Having
being
them-
able to point and say, we have members in the audience
Yeah. Yeah.
here. Okay, I'm just gonna try to go.
So I would anticipate maybe counselors wanting to hear from members of PMAC that your reasons for why this consolidation makes sense to you. And so I don't know, sometimes Chairman Clutie kind of opens it up to counselor questions and then people from the audience are asked to
Oh.
approach the podium.
Okay,
That doesn't always happen, but I think Jamie said it nicely that there was some mixed temperature at Rules and Policy. And so I'm not 100% sure where the council lands on this right now. And I think just for your own benefit, being able to put a name to a face, being there, being available to answer questions if they have them is going to be to your best interest.
What's the process? So first reading, there's discussion, and then there's the hope for motion to move it forward for a vote at the following town council meeting?
Yeah.
Okay.
May I just ask a quick
Oh,
question?
yeah.
It has been noted for council that it was Town Manager Hall that requested this, right? Put this
It
forward.
has been
Okay. just making sure
very
that
well
that keeps-
documented.
keeps getting
There's a
documented.
there's a long history that is available to the full council. And to Jamie's point, this is now gone for two different committees where there's different councils on each of those.
Okay.
we've hit almost everybody before it's even got to the full council at this point, so.
Does Tom Hall say he's in support of this? Has he actually come out and said it? Because he's the one who asked for it in the first place, right?
Honestly, it's the council that asked for it in the first
Oh, the
place. He just
council.
conveyed
Oh.
that message to me.
Okay,
Gotcha.
It's just that council is not this council,
Some of
right?
them are.
Correct. Yeah, some are the same, some are not. One question that I believe,
Chuck.
Oh. Chuck, yes. Do you have your
Jamie,
hand up?
yes, Jamie, can you speak to the concerns of certain councilors? And is it fair to say who has them?
I mean, it was voiced publicly, so I think it's fair to say it was Jean Marie Katerina, and her concern was that she sees them as two separate and distinct groups. She was around at the beginning when Pmac was formed and felt like their charge was very specific, and she just, from what I recall, she felt like they should remain separate, and she said that it was going to take a lot of convincing to get her on board with this proposal.
Can I add to that, she told me she's a no, and but she's one of a full number of counselors.
Yeah.
And that it's, as I understand it, not so much that they should be separate groups, but that specifically Pmac is a body of the town, whereas the Conservation Commission is not a body of the town. It's of the state advising the town. So I believe her, if I understand her concerns correctly, as long as Pmac is still a body of the town, the authority is stronger, and accountability of the town is stronger if it's a body of the town, if it remains in the town. So that's.
How is the Conservation Commission not a body of the town?
Because it's legislated.
Good question.
So.
But even the town council is legislated in a similar way.
So it's one vote, but it's an interesting perspective and something to be mindful of. There was, I see that Emily asked a question, but you said there were two counselors who spoke up at the last meeting, so, right?
Well, the other one was Don Hamill, and I think, April, you can chime in if you'd like. I think that his is more of a process question and less so of an actual how it's going to, like the fact that it's being proposed, just to make sure that it's being done under the proper process.
Yeah, I think, so Counselor Hamill is someone that he's the chair of appointments and negotiations. So this started off with his committee, but then he also attended the Rules and Policy Committee meeting where this was discussed and expressed concerns again, that somehow Pmac has authority that Conservation Commission doesn't have. It's been explained, and Jamie got a legal opinion that both are advisory bodies, and that this really isn't about authority or influence. And so I think he is still leery of whether or not the Conservation Commission can fulfill the charge of Pmac, given everything else Conservation Commission has to focus on. So I think more tangible concerns that he expressed. Other than that, I don't think any counselor has spoken to it publicly, but those were the two that we definitely heard had some questions or concerns still.
Emily?
Just a really quick procedural question. We do not need unanimous vote, do we? Just a majority to get this through council?
Yeah.
Okay, I got one more question. So the chronology of how this all
The long.
the long road was, so the town council, do you even remember which counselor
I
we
was
know?
never told which council, so
We're not
it was,
told. Okay.
it was part of their goal setting back in 2019. Do
Okay.
you know which count?
This Council Hamel
Okay,
had the general sense that the number of town committees we had was a little unwieldy. And so had
Yes.
asked at the time for one of the council goals to be to examine the charge and the role of each committee to see if there was room for efficiencies.
right. And then, because I just rewatched that committee meeting, and it sounded like you came up with the idea of Pmac and conservation and the overlap, or who came up with that idea? Just so, I'm not blaming, or,
So
I just want to understand.
the way it was conveyed to
Oh, that-
me was that Tom Hall asked me to look at the 3 committees that I was involved with, which is
Okay.
conservation, sustainability, and Pmac, and to see where there may be overlaps, where there could be some consolidation for efficiency.
Okay,
And Pmac and Conservation Commission made the most sense.
okay, great, thank you. So there's that sequence of how this happened. So it has gone through Tom and you.
No other committees were recommended. for
There-
consolidation.
There are a couple of others.
Yeah.
All right, that's good to know also.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so yeah,
I
some of
think
the committees related to community services are
Yeah.
kind of being, it's on the same agenda, are
Yeah,
being.
Rec advisory and community services.
Okay.
Okay, that, I didn't even realize those were really two. So I actually got in touch with Tony, this was like months ago, maybe like a year ago, and I asked her what the process was for merging, and she said there wasn't one.
And here we are.
And here we are, right,
And
because there
so-
wasn't one.
And
there
so
was-
technically what we're doing from a process standpoint, technically what we're doing is we're dissolving Pmac. And we are voting to approve an updated charge for Conservation Commission, which includes the roles and responsibility once held by Pmac. And then this will need to go back to appointments and negotiations for them to decide on whether or not they would recommend 2 new members and what the committee makeup is going to be, and then they will take care of filling those spots.
Have those charges and responsibilities been published?
Pardon me?
Are
What'd you
those,
say?
are those responsibilities and charges written?
Yes.
Yes,
So
so,
Pmax is in the pest management, policy.
Yeah.
And the Conservation Commissions is in town ordinance with all of the other advisory committees that the town has.
And those are updated?
Yes.
The merged document
Yeah.
had, was merged in a way that made the wording flow as best as possible, but did not add to or take away from, 0 changes to the 2 charges.
It basically just said that the, in terms of the pest management policy, instead of, it basically named the Conservation Commission as the Pest Management Advisory Committee, and all other references to the Pest Management Advisory Committee were changed to Conservation Commission.
okay, so there's also an update to the policy that would have to happen.
And yeah, that's part
But
of,
that would be later.
that's part of this whole decision-making process.
Oh, it
as
is,
well.
like,
So
when
it's,
they're, like Wednesday night, they're voting on.
they're not voting on anything on Wednesday. It's their
They're
first
not.
reading of it. So
Oh,
it's kind
okay.
of the introduction to this whole, for the one
This-
last counselor who
has
has
been
been
a
a
new
chair,
Okay.
and he is aware of all what's
Okay.
happening.
Got it. And then, okay, so, and then, but the changes in the policy and the changes in the charge, it's all happening
If it happens,
be
it will be
voted on.
made simultaneously.
simultaneously. Got it. Great. Okay.
Everything that needs to be done has been identified. It's
Yeah.
just the
Yes,
process
it's
of
just
getting
the process of.
To our knowledge, everything that needs to be
That's
done
right.
has been
Yes,
identified,
well
because we
qualified, well
do,
qualified.
we do keep getting questions.
Right. So if there are no issues, then there's the first reading, the second reading, and after the second reading, there's a vote. Should be a vote.
There should be, so
Correct?
the
Should
second
be voted.
reading, so at the second meeting, we'll have the second reading, a public hearing for anyone who wants to speak for or against, or neither for nor against. and then a vote. So that should all happen at the second meeting, which will be April 6th.
And I have one other thing that I remembered, that had been a concern, and just relaying information as your liaison, that, I know we had talked about, not being able to hold quorum had been a challenge. And several counselors had communicated that that was not a compelling reason for consolidation. So maybe go the other way on that. Just to bring that up as a justification.
And
Because-
neither is the number of members of Pmac were
Yeah, right.
to stay separate. Not,
Yeah.
the numbers on Pmac is not a compelling reason.
It's not a,
Yeah,
it's not a
yeah, I
compelling,
sort of agree with that, actually.
Okay. so
Um,
that had come up during discussion, and
Okay, so I think the last thing I want to ask about is the idea that it sounds like there's some nervousness about the pest management policy becoming a town-wide
Yes.
ordinance, and does that automatically happen? Or
that's the question.
am I right? Has
That-
that come up as an issue?
that
Yeah,
has
it's
come
come up
up
as
as
an
an
issue.
issue.
Right, okay, so I
And
don't
it's
really
been
know how,
dispelled as a non-issue
For this
multiple.
meeting, yeah.
okay, so if that is a question, let's just say I'm asked that question. Am I trying to pass a townwide policy?
I don't think that they're gonna ask you point blank that.
They wouldn't?
I don't
Okay.
think so.
Okay,
No, they would
You have
not.
to remember what Pmac is charged with, and it's charged with a very, very specific, narrow thing, the
absolutely.
way it's written.
And that has been our goal and our focus,
Right.
and
so-
it's easier
so-
to
so
deal with that.
Pretty much makes it a non-starter at this point, because the entire policy would have to change for,
Well, it would no longer be a policy, it would have to be an official ordinance.
Versus a
Right.
policy that
so,
guides what they're doing.
Chuck,
So as a united committee, do we have any input into answering that question? Could the policy be changed, expanded, improved, become meaningful?
It's only the council that has that power to expand that, or
we could
Right.
potentially.
we
recommend
should
it.
recommend it, but it's the council that gets to decide whether or not it goes into effect or not.
Emily?
Are we permitted to talk about it?
I wouldn't bring it up unless they bring it up.
No, not at this. I
think
mean,
we
among
need to-
ourselves.
Can we talk about it?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think so.
of course.
I think there's language in the draft plan, so.
But I just wanted to say, I don't think now is the time to bring it up. I think we need to settle this and then we can address that at a later date.
Yeah.
I agree.
Cool.
Third,
I'm with you there. I just don't want to have that question come to me, and
Is there a way that,
how would I deflect it, or would I just
I
say?
would just
Well,
say,
I'm
your
just-
role as a PMAC member is to oversee the implementation
Right.
of the pest management.
So
policy.
I'm just I would be serving on the Conservation Commission in a similar capacity, just
Yes.
to advise the town with town.
Yeah, I would say your capacity is not changing, just the committee that you serve has changed. Because that role still exists now, it just
Right.
exists under a different umbrella.
The policy still spells out what the role of the PMAC is. It just
Right.
means it's a different body to serve in that role.
Yes,
fun.
it'll be okay. This has been a tremendous amount of bureaucracy, and I appreciate it.
I agree.
What a fun first
I know.
liaison.
Okay.
Yeah,
shit,
right?
You guys.
You picked well.
I do appreciate you trying to move it forward
Oh.
like fairly quickly in that
Oh,
meeting. Like, I move that we move it. We Talk about this some more.
and again and again, thank you. All right, thank you all. Anything else on that point? Anything else, Jamie?
I got nothing.
See you Wednesday.
Okay, yeah.
I'm
see,
just curious, who is interested in going on Wednesday?
I'll probably be there physically.
Okay, I'm gonna try to go. Anybody else?
I was
I'll go.
hoping to participate virtually.
And I cannot go. I'm in Virginia this week.
Okay,
I can go.
I can go virtually.
Yeah.
great.
Okay.
Did you say you don't want us to come personally?
No, you can come virtually
you,
or in
Chuck.
person, depending on
Okay.
whatever you want to do.
I probably would come in person, I think.
I would say if you're able to come in person, that's probably better, especially as
Okay.
committee members, because they may not necessarily know your name on the screen, but they recognize your face in person.
They do.
Is it Wednesday or Thursday?
Wednesday,
Wednesday.
Wednesday at 7.
7.
Wednesday at 7, okay.
hopefully you guys are.
I'm still on the agenda. I mean, still able to be entertained. Okay, is everyone ready to move on to our goals for 2022? Excellent. So we talked last meeting about putting our action items into broad buckets around land conservation and land protection. And that we really wanted to move into action items. So I made an attempt at that and circulated that document. Does everyone have access to it?
I can pull it up on the screen if you just give me a second too. If that would be
Great.
helpful.
What I did was go through our comprehensive plan again, pull out, went through our minutes, pulled out things from the state of Maine's climate action plan goal related to the work of the Conservation Commission, try to consolidate them here and tease out some action items. But it is a draft, and I also named what I would think are some of our key community partners. So this is a draft, but I'd love to hear some comments about it. Does anybody more of an introduction to it?
We lost our members on the screen so that those here can see this in person.
Okay. Are you able to
But I
adjust
just,
the screen size? There we go. Wish there was a way to decide where we want the face windows to go. Okay. So anybody who's participating virtually, if you want to speak, we can see some of you, but not all of you. So can you speak up when you'd like to make a comment? Because we can't see if you're raising your hand or not. Let me just see if I can.
Randy, I just want to thank you for the work you did to put this together. It was very well thought out. It very clearly articulated what we talked about last time. I know
Great.
it was an effort, and thank you very much for
Thanks,
being so
Randy.
organized and there. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And then just so you know, if you raise your hand on your screen, we can see that. Thank you, Jamie.
and I'm trying to deal with my system resources here for
Fun. Okay, so under land conservation, we're looking broadly at protecting natural resources and stormwater management. That our actions would be to create a conservation plan, which would include mapping conserved lands, mapping wetlands, which is underway, so that's good. Then using that to identify opportunities for conservation and ways that we can connect trails and conserve land. And then this is straight out of the state of Maine's climate action plan, incorporate into our conservation plan a goal of conserving 30% of land in the community with these priorities there. And then, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Well, let me just finish that last bullet and then,
Yeah.
And then I had question mark re-establish, or do we just need to establish an advisory role to the town council, planning board, and zoning board of appeals for issues dealing with land use so that we're balancing growth in the natural environment. The balancing piece is definitely in the comprehensive plan. And I don't know that we have an existing process where we're brought in to advise these bodies on that balancing. Maybe I can stop on land conservation, or do you want me to go through the land protection just to pull out those action items and then open discussion? Why don't I do that, and then we're covering it all?
Yep.
So land protection, we're looking at coastal hazards and sea level rise, wanting to protect the health of watersheds by directing growth to current growth areas, and preserving and maintaining existing farms and open spaces, and important connections to nature. Where our action would be to create a climate action and resiliency plan with specific actionable items, priorities, resources required, cost estimates, which I thought would incorporate prioritizing the Route 1 crossing over Scarborough Marsh, which we see in the community action grant action right now, incorporating a plan for how to expand coastal conservation, pursue establishment of resiliency overlay zones, and review ordinance updates focused on setbacks and building elevations. And then a piece around lawn care practices that we will hold for another time. And then under education, there's a lot of different ways that we could engage the community, both preparing the community for flooding, sea level rise, but also helping in different ways, and then creating guidebooks, partnering with other organizations, hosting community-wide events, and presenting workshops for town council. I was looking at the workshop specifically that Pete gave in 2016, which is prescient. Like if we'd taken action then, maybe we'd be further along. So I think those are important, the workshops to update on, but specifically that was about sea level rise too. Okay, so open for discussion and starting to claim pieces, etc. Pete?
I just had one, two quick comments. One was, I think it's important in the first statement under land conservation. I like it, but I think we need to include in there, I think Noah would probably second this, not just an interconnected network of public open spaces, but an interconnected network of public open spaces and, I don't know how to term it, but habitat. So contiguous habitat is one of the most important things that we can do in our, if we conserve 30%, it's best to make it so there's contiguous habitat throughout that.
Great.
Not just
The patchwork quilt.
0.1% here, 0.1% here,
Yes.
0.1%.
Okay.
So I think it's important to interconnect, habitat, maybe, and habitat works. But
I like the word contiguous, because
Yeah.
that is really what you want. You need
contiguous
pieces
habitat,
of land that are near
Right.
each other.
Right. Like if we're gonna protect all along the Northwest River, there should be contiguously all along the Northwest River.
Yes.
Stuff
Yes.
like that.
Great. Thank you.
And then the second one was under education. And I guess maybe this falls under the prepare, or maybe it's the help, but I think there are a lot. So for instance, we've held workshops in the past on, I lost my train of thought. Composting. We held a big workshop on composting with folks, and suddenly, and then the town sold, I think, 30 or 40 of their composting bins after
Nice.
holding that workshop with a bunch of folks. We also held workshops in conjunction with folks from like Citizens of Cleaner Scarborough, I think it was, who were looking at the beginning of the pesticide management advisory committee. Before that even happened, we held a joint workshop with them.
We did.
So we want to make sure we have enough flexibility in our education statement to not just be focused on those two things, you know what I mean? So if something else comes up, like, for example, best management practices in the Scarborough River watershed, you want to be able to touch on that, because that's not really dealing with coastal hazards, flooding, and sea level rise. It's dealing with how to manage your property properly when you live adjacent to or contiguous with a tributary or marsh, just example. So we want to have enough flexibility in our statement there to touch on topics like that.
Okay.
Otherwise, I think it's awesome.
Provide education to residents on conservation topics.
A variety of conservation
Okay.
topics, yeah, something like that.
Great. Emily,
I have two questions. Under number 1, under the treat stormwater management as an opportunity to increase the amount of contiguous or continuous green space, how does that bullet, or could we clarify how that bullet correlates to the action plans below?
yes.
I'm guessing that we're creating a conservation plan that is using this stormwater management spaces, but I think we should have a really specific bullet that goes along with that, because it's a great idea, and it's a kind of low-hanging fruit in some ways because we already have that space. I just think we should have a really specific action plan around it.
Okay. Pete,
Go ahead, I think you had a second point, Emily, but the one I wanted to say on that was, so in that statement, are we literally saying we want to treat green space as a natural buffer for stormwater? Is that the idea?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because it does fall into the whole concept of we want to map existing wetlands, we want to map existing conserved lands, identify opportunities for conservation. If we're doing that, it all kind of fits under the umbrella of creating these corridors or buffers, I'll call them, that can actually buffer stormwater as opposed to building right to 25 feet adjacent to tributaries, which is what we do currently.
So maybe this is stormwater management comes out, goes, or the order of the sentence or that piece needs to shift a little bit. So the priority is really increase the amount of continuous green space.
Yeah, I almost would put the focus on green space and less on stormwater.
Yeah.
And use stormwater as an action
There we go. That's perfect. Yeah, that does it. And that way we're saying we're tying in this continuous green space, and it's also almost like as a byproduct, it's a way to manage stormwater.
Yep.
Yeah.
Perfect. Good. Next question is around the lawn care practices. So Randy, you said we were going to leave that.
Yes.
Okay, and so that's fine. We'll just leave it as it is for now. Do we also want to include something about on the overlays under the 1, 2, 3, third bullet down under actions here on number 2? Do we want to include something about what is included in those resiliency overlay zones? This is where we thought we would have potentially different recommendations for how much pesticides are being used based on how close we are to conserved lands or wetlands. Do we want to be that detailed, or do we want to just know that that's what we're going to do, or what we would advise at some point later down the road?
What I was thinking is that the detail behind that and other bullets would be added as we start to build out all of these action items. So we've seen and Pete has shared the plan under these resiliency overlay zones. So this is an ode to that, and no, I think we as a committee are acknowledging, or we want to acknowledge that we're going to pursue this, and it has those different layers under it.
Okay, I'm as you can tell, I'm sure I'm just wanting to make sure that we preserve the idea of potentially limiting pesticide use. And I think that the 2 bullets you have here will do that. I just want to make sure that we continue to keep focus on that.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's awesome. Thank you again. Very well laid out.
Thank you. Chuck, do you have anything you'd like to?
Yes, relevant to both Pete and Emily's remarks. I met with a group of condo dwellers who are in two different condo associations over on Easton Road, off Easton Road. And they were talking about wanting to do this very thing. They're very concerned about how their drainage goes right into the marsh, which is an easy stone's throw from their condos. So I'm saying there's community support for this that I know of. And it's just ironic that I had this discussion a few days ago. Yeah.
So maybe under partnerships, I'll say neighborhood associations.
Yeah. Yeah.
And is the,
Yes, that can be developed for sure. Yeah.
Citizens for Greener Scarborough?
yeah,
You were thinking of?
yes, thank
I
you.
assume they still exist?
Not really.
No.
Okay,
I mean,
Okay.
it's not really an active group.
Okay.
No, that group really just formed to try to get that policy passed.
Mhm.
And it is, no, doesn't meet regularly, no. But
Okay.
what I would say related to that is, because I keep thinking about the public and how can we hear the public's voice?
Mhm.
Because I think a lot of people don't feel like their voice is being heard, just sort of in general. But let's just say with the issues related to the Conservation Commission, could there be a way that any member of the public could talk to this group or email somebody, or could we be sending out surveys and asking people what their concerns are? Or I don't know. I just think that there needs to be a better way, because people are not going to go to the town council meetings. I'm sorry, but they're just not going. The public is just not going to go. Partially because people don't, they're spread so thin. If you've got young kids, you have to get your kids to bed and you're exhausted. So I'm just wondering, is there a way we can involve people, the public,
okay.
in a more active way? I don't even know what I'm thinking. I'm just throwing this out there.
So I added at the top of education, encourage feedback from and listen to residents about their ideas for conservation in Scarborough. And then one of the actions is host community-wide events.
So I will say the community meeting that we had specifically for the community action grant, like that requirement, that was really well attended. We had over 50 people register, over 30 people participate.
Wow. Wow.
And had some, I thought, really good and thoughtful feedback, and it seemed like people wanted more of that. So
Right.
something that this group wants to do on a semi-annual basis, maybe spring and fall or something, is just have one of our meetings dedicated to open
nice.
community
Okay.
forum
Yeah.
and advertise it, put it out to our other advisory committees in town, but then just publicize it through different channels so that people can come and talk to us about what their concerns are, what their priorities are, areas where that maybe it's in a blind spot for us and we're not, focusing on it or giving it attention. And obviously we're going to have to then take that feedback and kind of prioritize it and then see where it might fit into existing goals that this group already has. But it seems like there's a lot that's captured here and I think a lot of it too is people don't necessarily know what we're working on. And so it will
That's a big part of it.
give an opportunity.
I actually I don't know, if somebody needs to write about what is a conservation commission and how, most municipalities have one, or any municipality can have one. And what is this group doing?
So I can comment on that. About 10 years ago, maybe shorter to 8 years ago, we did a series in the Leader written by members of the Conservation Commission. And it was on a bunch of different topics. I think we touched on sea level rise. I think we touched on composting. We touched on, I forget what else, but there were 3 or 4 articles that went in, and we tried to do it monthly, not weekly, but we tried to do it monthly. It's a little bit too much to ask members to write weekly articles.
Yeah.
But That might be something we revisit, because you know how right now there's some of the Mike Shaw writes something almost for
Right.
every issue, and somebody from fire or that does something. So
Actually, our pest management advisory committee, we put in a bunch of articles
Okay,
in
so-
that town space.
so it might make sense to revisit that and get in touch on some of the hot topics that we might be working on. So we've done it in the past, whether or not the public even reads it, or they just shred it and put it right in the fireplace for.
They might, and they
started
might
with
just say,
stoves, I don't
okay,
know.
great, I'm so glad that group's working on all this stuff.
Survey, that's the leaders, the number one place where people get their information.
Okay, well, that's good to know. Okay, so there is a model for that. We've done it before.
Great,
And the leader was very good at working with us on.
I bet they love it, actually.
And I can work with Allison, our communications person too, about,
That's exactly what I was gonna say was, you know, we now, the town now has a communication strategist, and Allison is excellent at producing a quality product very quickly in terms of like, you know, she would be happy to blast it on the town's social media, to create a link for it on the website, to give you space in the e-newsletter.
Right.
And read about, you know, giving it a uniform look and, you know,
Great.
the presentation part of it is really, really impressive. So
Nice.
you guys could definitely access her.
And Jamie wrote a nice article about the community.
well, and I want to say that, like, you know, I did the first draft and then Allison was the one that polished it and finalized it for me. So it was a good collaboration, but yeah, she's an amazing resource to have. So even if folks are feeling like hesitant about something, we can just figure out a schedule, plan to get it to Allison ahead of time, and she'll put her polish on it and finalize it. So yeah, I think trying to do more just community awareness through the leader, I think would be helpful.
Okay. And I had one of the partnerships as potential partnerships with Scarborough Library, because they're, if you see, it went down to the next page, but because they, the other way, they host they can host meetings for us, community events, articles, that sort of thing. So another good partner. And Andrew, you'll see we're naming Scarborough Land Trust. Andrew and Rita, you'll see we're naming Scarborough Land Trust as a partner, and other organizations in town. And at the top are the two organizations. We also have a lot of work already that who we're doing with. So I think to thank you all. Are there other comments or additions, adjustments?
I just want to mention, Randy, that because our merger is not proceeding as quickly as we thought it would, that I am thinking very much along the lines, as you've already discussed, to on behalf of Pmac, to continue our great relationship with Allison Courier, to get some of our articles in the Leader and the Town e-News, specifically our tick awareness info sheet, and then we have a series of 3 that we do for transitioning to organic lawn care, spring, summer, and fall. So I'm thinking that we probably will proceed under Pmac umbrella of those info sheets again.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, let's do that, Rita.
Okay.
And we'll send them to Allison, and who knows, maybe she could put it,
Yep.
Her special touch on it.
Yep.
Thank you. We have not been meeting as a committee.
Okay.
Right.
We assume we'd be part of
Right.
this one, but anyway, it's fine.
I just slip in your committee meetings.
Yeah, it's really early just reading myself at this point.
So what would be great is if we have multiple volunteers around the commission to take on one or more action item as a lead charge on it, and sort of flesh it out. Like for example, one of the action items is pursuing establishment of a resiliency overlay zone. We have that sort of detailed, but what would that entail? We have a plan in place for prioritizing Route 1 crossing. We have work underway of mapping the existing conserved lands and the wetlands. But it would be helpful to have a champion for each of these action items so that we can do some work in between meetings and come with an update. So who has the most energy right now to raise their hand about something on here?
Can you repeat that again? You're looking for volunteers
Yeah.
to,
To champion one or more action item, just to say, I'll take the lead on essentially fleshing it out, putting some initial thought around resources needed, connections to be made, and I think most critically, like, how do we know that, what do we need to do? How do we know that we've succeeded, like when we're done, or we can tick off the box to the next step, and then what is needed to get us there? So just to look at these action items and start to put some plans in place so we know as a group what we need to do. And
I
since
mean,
you-
I'm not officially part of this group, but I mean, I tend to like the education outreach piece
okay, great.
of this. So you can put my name in it.
Excellent.
Not that I mean, I'm
Thank you,
hoping other people would.
Yeah.
Randy,
No,
I
Okay.
think I'm probably the most qualified under education as well. To help at least right now until we could be a little bit more explicit about the pesticide use.
great.
To at least
So
help flesh that out.
work together. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. And I might be jumping topics a little bit, but I feel like we need to maybe talk a little bit about all of the energy around Scarborough Marsh, maybe before we necessarily assign some of these,
Okay, good.
some of the other action items.
Well, And he's not here, but it kind of feels like Noah's helping to lead us on the mapping piece. And Andrew, I know that you're supporting on that as well, in your leadership of Scarborough Land Trust. And that perhaps these action items align with some of the, I don't know, but perhaps some of these action items, some of them align with the goals of the Scarborough Land Trust as well. So there's natural ways that we would be working together. Yes.
I have one additional thought. Can you scroll down for under land protection, please?
Up or down.
Jump right there is perfect. Sorry, I was asking Randy to do it. I forgot you were controlling. I think it's important for us not to, we have so much land protection potentially baked into action item number 1 or task number 1. I think we really need to focus on the word somewhere in there about resiliency, because what we're talking about is creating more resilient landscapes. By all of these things that we're talking about, infrastructure and landscape. So maybe we change that to land protection. Because land protection, some people get, what do you mean land protection? You're not gonna allow anybody to build anywhere or do anything? There's this immediate thing, so we might want to change that to something about resilience, because everything we talk about there was resilience.
Well, we could, the top action bullet is create a climate action resiliency plan. We could just call number 2 climate action resiliency.
Sure.
Is that getting to what you were?
I think so. The climate is part of it. A lot of stuff that we do in there could be related to climate resiliency, so sure.
Where do you want Or would you feel more comfortable with resilient landscapes or something like that, that,
Creating resilient something, creating, I mean, you can include climate in there, but I think it's important to not label it land protection. I should have
Okay.
caught that at first. I don't know if landscapes is the right idea, but
we're just building?
not for some things.
Something.
Building resiliency.
Building resiliency works.
Okay,
Creating resiliency.
Building.
building,
I like building better.
okay.
As long as we're clear that it's not like a
A
physical building.
Right.
But we do talk about, in any kind of climate action and resiliency plan, you're going to be talking about infrastructure. So it's, I mean, because our natural landscape resiliency is tied to our built infrastructure resilience. So building resiliency works.
Nice, okay.
Thank you,
So
thank you.
conserving land and building resilience, I have to have them the same.
Yeah,
And going back to your question about volunteering for something, I would be happy to present to town council again
Yes,
on anything related to sea rise, flooding, erosion.
nice.
I think that they would be welcome to that in the near future, when their schedule allows, based on the feedback that I was hearing during the
Because
ordinance.
there's a lot
committee
going
meeting.
on. There's dredging in the Scarborough River, there's erosion at Pine Point, there's Pine Point Association being miffed about the erosion, there's sea level rise, there's a lot.
I think there's gonna be a lot of opportunity because, like I alluded to, and I'll get to in a minute, there's a lot of energy right now around Scarborough Marsh.
Okay.
And it was not only during the ordinance committee meeting, it was during the first council meeting in March where they passed the climate change and resiliency resolution. There was a whole lot of support for being more proactive when it comes to climate and resiliency.
Awesome. So I'm happy to put my name under there for the education, and then I'm happy to also work with whoever on, somewhere in there, we have something about building setbacks and also elevating structures.
Yes, yeah.
So Jay and I worked on that in 2012, the elevating structures part. And so happy to do that again.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And what I'll do is I'll add to this so that we can note that or circulate it after this meeting. Chuck, is there something that's calling your name in terms of action items? Maybe something around the
You're muted, Chuck.
conserving land, especially as it relates to the Maine Climate Action Plan? I don't know.
Sure, I'm also interested in the building resiliency. I guess I should decide.
Well, we're all going to be involved in all of it.
Yeah.
It's really, what do you want to focus on and help us know which way to go on these action items?
The land conservation.
Okay, so it might be around identifying opportunities for conservation or incorporating a goal of conserving 30% of land.
I like that.
Okay, thank you. And then I'll do another review of all this and add my name in certain places. But we're all, like I said, we're all in on this whole plan together. And I think it will help if we do some of this work outside of the meeting and then come back with reports on this.
And one quick follow-up question. In our reference to a climate action plan, I don't remember what we decided. Does that include the development of like what South Portland did in looking at greenhouse gas emissions in all their buildings and all that stuff? So it was really, really in-depth of infrastructure and also tied to mitigation. Is that what we're talking about there?
Well, so the answer is, we don't know yet until we sort of tease this out
Okay.
and come together and say, okay, this is what we want to do. But the 4 items that I know relate to it are what we've already talked about,
Okay.
which is plenty, I think, for this committee.
It is.
Yeah.
I just didn't know if that's kind of where we were going down or not, because that is a different thing than just, that by itself would be a huge effort, probably require a grant and a consultant.
Right.
Yeah.
And
So-
and the sustainability committee would
Right.
probably bite that piece
Okay,
I was thinking.
Right.
cool,
of the puzzle.
perfect.
Marla,
I was just gonna ask that resilience overlay zone, is this a concept that Noah created? I mean,
no,
is
Pete
that-
did.
Oh, I'm sorry, he did. That phrase exist outside of,
Yes,
okay, so this is in
So-
common usage.
it's not common. This,
not common,
this
okay.
is a concept which came out as part of Portland and South Portland's One Climate Future effort, but it's also something that we've been batting around at the state level for some time. And we haven't really gotten it yet. But the Portland,
Okay.
Portland and South Portland's one was really focused on infrastructure resiliency and open space. And I just said, well, why not kind of treat these different, and I use the distance from the marsh as an example, as different ways to tie in all kinds of natural and infrastructure resilience. So that's why I threw in stormwater and I threw in pesticides and I threw in other things, just thinking about it holistically. It might not be the way we actually implement it because of the way our ordinances are written, but concepts could be taken and adapted to our existing ordinance structure. Otherwise, because to implement this, we'd have to change our ordinance structure quite a bit. I think, the ordinance language.
I think you're right.
And it's
But-
the time where we're.
But this
doing
is something
reviews
that
of
kind of stemmed
ordinances,
from what Portland and South Portland were doing.
Okay, no, that I like the fact that other towns are using this language. I wasn't sure if the Conservation Commission had made this up, so, I
Yeah.
love the idea of it.
And theirs was just tier 1 was like the highest astronomical tide plus X amount of sea level rise. And in that, you have to have specific resilient building standards. You have to elevate structures. You have to conserve X amount of open space. Their tier 2 was like the 100-year storm plus X amount of sea level rise. And in there, you have to do the same things, but to a slightly lower standard because it's looking out into the future. And then their third one was like 500-year storm plus sea level rise. And in that zone, like things were recommended, not, they weren't standardized. So it would like recommend resilient building practices because we don't know if sea level is going to get to that in like 100 years. So that's the way they kind of structure it.
I would like to, before we move off of this, I would like to ask a question around if establishing an advisory role, to town council, planning board, and zoning board of appeals around land use and conservation. I don't know if that exists currently. And what is the process? What do we need to do to enact some kind of, or ask for some kind of process?
So that is going to require, I think, some outreach with some internal outreach in the town to talk to the staff who lead, and just at least in terms of planning board and zoning board. There used to be that capacity, and Pete was here when that happened, so I don't have all of the
Okay.
information, and he may, but there were some issues with that basically led the town to decide we're only going to request the Conservation Commission weigh in on various things as the planning board or zoning board would like them to. So there's no longer the open invitation for Conservation Commission to put feedback and comment on development. So I think in order for that to happen, like I said, there needs to be some conversations with staff and some kind of framework and criteria and like triggers for when Conservation Commission may automatically weigh in.
Okay.
So
All right.
I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm just saying
Okay.
there needs to be some outreach and discussion to get everyone back onto that page.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
So how do we participate in that discussion?
I definitely feel like that would be very valuable for us to pursue
Yeah,
finding out more, having those conversations, because without being involved in those planning and zoning conversations, we're not able to do the conservation that we want to do.
correct.
Yeah, right now it's only at the request of those groups, if they request.
I think this is really important. I really think this is a key point here.
And I just want to remind everyone, though, that the planning board reviews to the standard of our ordinance. So we can provide opinion all we want, but unless it's stated that developers need to do something a specific way in our ordinance, our input isn't necessarily going to matter. So we need to decide where our energy should lie. Should it lie providing input onto the development plans, or should it be looking at our ordinances and making changes there that will happen across the board, no matter what the development is, the proposed development is that's coming into Scarborough?
Very wisely said, Jamie.
Is there, maybe it sounds like there's a chance in between meetings to have a meeting with staff.
I can work on greasing those skids.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you.
If you don't mind, I'm going to stop sharing this now, if
Yes,
that's all right.
yeah. Thanks all. So I think we can move on to the community action grants. And Jamie can update us.
Yeah, so let me just get my my screen back. So as you all have been, I've been trying to keep you informed of where things are going with that. So we had our community meeting at the end of February. As I said, it was really well attended. And since that meeting, we've had a couple follow-up meetings with Maine DOT. We've gotten some really positive news from them that they are interested in doing pretty much resiliency planning for both the Route 1 crossing of Scarborough Marsh and the Route 9 Pine Point Road crossing of Scarborough Marsh. And so knowing that the town of Scarborough is interested in those two road crossings, they have moved them way up in their list. And so they'll be, they're actually starting their preliminary kind of survey work and starting to get their ducks in a row. Currently, they're hoping that they have some of their data collected over the next couple of weeks for that. So in meeting with them, we already knew this, but it became abundantly clear that there are going to be a whole lot of stakeholders involved in this process, both kind of residents and local stakeholders, just users of the roads, the advocacy groups, state agencies, federal agencies, and others. So there's going to be a huge outreach process that needs to happen, and DOT admitted that that's not really their forte, and they asked the town to take on that outreach process, which I think that the town is much better positioned to do that than DOT would be. During the course of these events, I also was contacted by Slade Moore, who works with the Maine Coastal Program, which is part of the Department of Marine Resources. And they are in the early stages of going after funding to do a huge resiliency study of Scarborough Marsh, which is going to look at, it's kind of going to dovetail with the project that Southern Maine Planning and Development Commission is doing, but kind of taking it on a larger scale and focusing it directly on Scarborough Marsh and looking at opportunities for restoration, vulnerable utilities and infrastructure, looking at the existing 27 Scarborough Marsh crossings that we currently have, and that might be 37, I can't remember. And then projecting out and looking at the potential 50 Scarborough Marsh crossings that we may have under sea level rise scenarios. And so trying to do very much a holistic look at what we need to be thinking about for Scarborough Marsh. How do we plan what we need to be looking at for our infrastructure, for the state's infrastructure, and our neighborhoods, our abutters to the marsh and things like that. So they're expecting that that's going to be at least a $500,000 project that they're going to be working on over the next, they said 2 to 3 years. I feel like something of this scale is going to go out way farther than that. So, but that's their initial thought. So, as we think about these resiliency overlay zones, I think that this, the process that the Maine Coastal Program is going to be leading is going to give us a whole lot of information about what we might want to be thinking about for those resiliency tiers through that process that they're embarking on. They said that the funding is not guaranteed, but they're really close to saying that the funding is guaranteed. So they're thinking that it's going to happen. They're just working on their kind of scope for NOAA. So the money would come through NOAA, and it is again related to the infrastructure money that was recently passed. So we did have a joint meeting last week with Coastal Program and DOT to kind of figure out how to work within these two projects. Hopefully we can collaborate. It does sound like DOT is probably going to be a little bit farther ahead than the Coastal Program. And the way it was left was that basically the Coastal Program wants a seat at the table during the stakeholder and planning process for the DOT roads, which I think we would include anyway if the town was leading that. So there's just so much going on, and I think that DOT recognizes that they need to do things differently, especially in terms of resiliency planning. That it's not going to be the regular, we're just going to make these culverts bigger and it's going to be good enough. It's going to take a lot more for our roads to be resilient to sea level rise and climate change. And they have started that process on Route 1 in Woolwich. They're redoing the bridge across the marsh up there. And there will be a similar process here. And I think that our outreach and engagement process will be more extensive than what they carried out.
Did DOT mention anything about modeling?
Yeah.
Yeah, because Coastal Programs grant is mostly going to be for modeling, but DOT has to do modeling to be part of their study of Route 9 and Route 1 with crossings. So are we going to have two different models? And DOT has $1 million for EDA to develop a coastal model for the state of Maine. So DOT is moving forward with this effort. I know they have funding for the infrastructure grant to specifically look at Route 9 and Route 1, but they're going to have to develop a model, and it's like, why not use that model to inform Slade's model, which is going to be all about tidal restrictions anyway. So,
and they are willing to share whatever data they have. They've already said that. So it's amazing. I mean, Pete knows this because he works for state agency, but how little state agencies talk to each other.
Yes.
So we're hoping that this process can hopefully bring a lot of those parties to the table, because everything is so interconnected. And why reinvent the wheel and collect data that why collect more data that a different agency has already collected? So I mean, DOT specifically said we expect to have our LiDAR data in hand within the next few weeks. And Slade was saying, oh yeah, we need to fly for LiDAR data. And DOT's like, we'll give you our data. As soon as we have it available, we'll give it to you. So hopefully we'll find some overlap and opportunities for collaboration there.
maybe it takes the town to coordinate between DOT.
And I'm saying this selfishly, you got a good job. I'm like, I don't want to be in 8 million meetings about Scarborough Marsh. Can we figure out a way to like do this all together? Because I'm not going to be able to keep it all straight personally. So, So yeah, I just feel like there's so much energy around Scarborough Marsh because of the infrastructure bill. There's all this money available that no one ever thought would be available. And so it's kind of identifying those like pie in the sky projects that no one ever thought you're going to be able to make happen, and make them happen. And so now it's also like, can we figure out how to work together? And like DOT is going to move forward faster than the coastal program, it sounds like. But so the coastal program is going to need to know what DOT is planning so that they can work that into their model and their overall study of the marsh. So there's many cooks and we need one chef to kind of like figure it all out. So and then in terms of the community action grant, our focus is going to be for this first one, doing the education and outreach and community engagement for Route 1 and Route 9. Because the town is a fairly large stakeholder in that process as well, we will be looking to hire a facilitator to help with that process so that, you know, the town can have an equal voice in that process as well and not necessarily be seen as biased one way or the other. And also looking at engaging our traffic engineers to kind of help the town through that process. And look out for our best interests as well. And just thinking about what we're going to need in terms of outreach. And DOT has started they kind of fast tracked it when COVID hit, but they have a new virtual community engagement tool where they're doing the majority of it online. They say that they're getting far more participation and feedback and reaching far more people. But Scarborough likes our meetings as well. So I think that we're going to be looking at doing a couple different approaches and trying to get as much input and guidance from the community as possible.
Speaking of all this modeling and all this flood stuff, you know what's the status? You know what the status of our floodplain maps is?
No.
Okay.
Status quo.
We can't even get our floodplain maps. Though.
No.
Okay.
From
It's not the
80s.
town's fault.
No.
I'm just saying. Because that's going to be an important deciding factor for all this design stuff.
Mhm.
Whether it's a B zone or an A zone, it's going to be a big role with what DOT designs for.
Mhm.
Okay, all right. Because that's a missing factor.
Right,
now.
but if we wait for those, then we'll never do anything.
I know. They can model them through their model and then give that to FEMA and say, here's the best thing that we've come up with, which is better than your model. So, okay, all right, just wondering.
So there's lots of moving parts still. That proposal is due a week from tomorrow. It will be done. I promise it will be done. So, and then we can start thinking about what we want to apply for in September with that round when it's done. So we did at one of the meetings that we had with DOT also included reps from GPCOG and the Governor's Office of Planning Innovation in the Future, GOPIF, who is the group that is administering this grant. And so while they couldn't give us, you know, input or feedback on our specific project, they did say that they felt like this would be applicable to community action grants. So that is positive. So here's hoping that this proposal is successful, and I think kind of showing a partnership between the town and DOT is pretty valuable. And also looking at both Route 1 and Route 9, those are two of the most vulnerable roads that have been identified in Scarborough. So if we're able to.
Is it just that upper section of Route 9 where the Audubon Center is?
Currently,
also all the way down?
It is just the upper center or near the Audubon Center.
So it's not near the fan base.
It's not by the clan bake. No, it's just by Audubon.
Floods there regularly.
Well, when they actually addressed that a couple of years ago, they filled those ditches. I don't know if you remember, if there were those tidally connected ditches. When they filled those ditches, the flooding of Clan Bake has gotten a lot better.
Oh, yeah. So it has been addressed somewhat. I mean, I won't say that it no longer floods. It just floods less.
Okay.
So, Jamie, you're such an asset. Thank you so
I
much
know.
for
Yeah,
coming
thanks
on
for
through.
taking this on.
And I'm really glad, April, that you called her out in a town council meeting for all the work.
Every
you're doing.
chance I get.
Yeah, just really well deserved. Put that in the minutes, please. so we can-
I can't do that. I type the minutes.
I know. She said, Jamie was
Watch the
such a-
recording first.
Please hear, yeah, you've done really fantastic work of pulling this whole process together and getting a news article out there to include in the grant application and all the other
All
details
that,
that
all
go
the
into talking to all the different stakeholders. Thank you. Exciting. Okay, let's wing through the updates, including touching on Sawyer Street Road and the Coastal Resiliency Project, I guess, if we can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know where you want to start. So Sawyer Street is another resiliency project. So this is one that we worked on with Cape Elizabeth. They kind of led that charge and we were a partner looking at Sawyer Street where it crosses Spurwink Marsh. Half of the road is in Scarborough, half is in Cape Elizabeth. And basically it was only analyzed in terms of maintaining current use of the road and what we would need to do under the prevailing sea level rise projection of that road. And it turns out it's going to be many millions of dollars to maintain that road that has, you know, less than 1,000 vehicle trips per day. So a town council workshop, a joint council workshop with Cape Elizabeth and Scarborough on Wednesday at 5:30. I'm like, is it 5 or 5:30? 5:30. I can send out the link to in the agenda. But basically, the councils will hear about the study that was done and then talk about possible next steps. And the subject of discontinuing use of that road will be broached. No decisions are going to be made. It's just a discussion to talk about if we were going to look at potentially discontinuing that road, what other information do we need? What other studies do we need to do, including a traffic study? And what do we do with that road? Do we remove it? Do we just abandon it in place? Things of that nature. I will share that all of the Scarborough abutters have been notified. So the property owners of along Sawyer Street have been notified that the workshop is happening. So we've been doing, except for the United States of America. Federal government, a large portion of one side of the road. One side of the road, yeah. So I didn't send them notification. It just says it is probably U.S. fish, but in our tax database, it literally says the United States of America.
Like motivation first.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So when you say Cape Elizabeth owns half the road and Scarborough owns half the road, is it like this is the road and there's like a line and
Yeah, there's a river, Spurwink
Okay.
River. And so on one
Cuts
side
it
of the
in one
river
side,
is
okay.
Scarborough, on the other side is.
does anybody live on this road?
There are like 10
Yeah,
landowners
9.
or residents.
9 residences, I think I read.
Yeah, and I think, and one technically, like, they have frontage, but really they access their property from Spurwink Road. But they still receive, notice. So, and this road already floods during king tides and storm events and things like that. So
So can all those people get to their homes even if that road is abandoned?
yeah, so it would
Okay,
just
so we
basically
could-
just dead end at the river on either side. And so Scarborough, like, you won't be able to come in through Cape Elizabeth.
Okay, right.
So it is going to, like, probably increase their travel times depending on where they go on a daily basis. And things like that. So, and we will need to look at traffic studies to see how will other intersections be impacted, and do other intersections need upgrades to accommodate the less than 1,000 trips per day that this road sees and things like that, but just making an informed decision. And so this will be kind of our town's first even discussion of possible managed retreat because of sea level rise. So this is a topic that that communities, coastal communities all over the world are having, and how do we deal with, you know, various things. Do we invest to maintain these things, or do we talk about abandoning? And so, like I said, this will be the first kind of foray into that conversation. And there will be many, many others beyond that if the councils decide that they're interested in considering that as an option. So I'll send everyone, if that's an online workshop, I can send everyone the link and the agenda. It's also on the town calendar for this Wednesday. And the other item that I added was the Southern Maine Coastal Resiliency Project. So things, I guess, are going to be starting back up with that this spring. They have been doing a lot of work behind the scenes. They've hired their GIS analysts to start looking at potential coastal hazards, and their impact of like sea level rise and erosion on people, infrastructure, and the natural environment. The project website is up and running. There will be a link in the minutes, and I can send it out as part of the meeting follow-up as well, where there's information about the project scope, timeline, and status. And then the working group, which Pete and I are both on, there are a couple items coming out soon. There will be a survey of coastal vulnerability as part of the coastal vulnerability assessment. They're planning a workshop sometime this summer to, so that we can learn about the results of the regional assessment, provide feedback on the assessment, and begin discussions about identifying priority vulnerable areas. And then they're also planning a field trip to vulnerable areas and or examples of where resiliency projects have been implemented for the working group. So that stuff's moving forward. Like I said, this will dovetail into the very Scarborough Marsh focused effort that State Planning Office may be working
Um,
on. Sorry, coastal program.
Gorham Connector Turnpike Project,
No update.
I didn't think
Haven't heard
there was
anything. Town council.
oh, nothing happened in February, right?
No. Jamie's touched on pretty much everything that's in front of the council. She alluded to the fact that several councilors were really impressed with the attendance at Jamie's
my meeting.
your meeting, your public meeting.
They're all here to see me.
Naturally.
It's really difficult to get 50 people to register for anything and then have 30 people show up. So
Yeah.
when that happens, I think the council certainly takes notice of that. Several people acknowledge that in the areas of conservation that they have a blind spot. And so let's build on that momentum and get in front of the council with some issues that are important to this committee and, you know, saying that Jamie's other committees, because I think she's right. I think there's a lot of energy around this topic right now. And so I think that outreach is going to be really well received.
What's the process of scheduling something? Because Pete has a presentation kind of ready to roll on sea level rise, and how do we, what's the process?
In the past, it's been workshop, right? That's the way we've done it before.
I know, like, especially as we're entering into budget season,
Yeah.
workshop time is going to be difficult to get.
Okay.
So we can probably put this on our radar for summer into fall, because summer they also try to do a reduced schedule. So it is probably most likely that we'll be looking at this in fall.
Okay.
And I will share also that quasi-related to this, they requested a workshop with the Sustainability Committee to talk about the EV charging ordinance. They said within 4 to 6 weeks, which I feel like that's ambitious. But this spring potentially talking about why the committee is proposing that and what it may look like, what an ordinance may look like, because it will be a fairly substantial change to our current ordinances to implement requirements for people to at least at a minimum prepare for the installation of EV chargers and at the maximum actually install those chargers at their properties.
Okay. Planning board.
I just have one planning board update to share, and it's not a happy one. So the planning board heard a sketch proposal, 20-unit apartment complex on a parcel of land at the intersection of Muzzy Road and Gorham Road, that abuts Warren Woods. So they're looking at, 12 10-unit buildings. 10, 12 unit buildings, I don't know, some, 10, 12 unit buildings, okay. So from what Eric has shared with me, they are looking at clustering that on just a portion of the parcel. It's about a 50+ acre parcel. And so
57.
I think it may have been 53.
Okay.
57. So
Is that area a lot, is that a lot of forested wetlands?
Yes.
Because
Good.
I walked around in there.
I don't even know how much
Very
it's
wet.
buildable. I'm sure they're using all of it as part of it.
I'm sure they are. Yeah, I had it, I mean, I can pull it up on the screen if people want to take a look at it.
The map you circulated with the wetlands overlay has, it looks like a pretty significant part of that. That acreage is covered with wetlands.
Yeah, let me see if I can pull it up on my screen real quick and then I can share.
Does it front the Nonsuch River?
Yes.
Yep.
And it's so close to, I'm sorry that Andrew had to jump off, but
Oh,
unless
yeah,
he is
right.
on, yeah,
It's
it's
near
so
Warren
close to
Woods.
Warren Woods.
Yep.
The bearings are all off of it. I couldn't,
So is this parcel like right on the corner of Muzzy Road?
Yeah, go down and
yes.
then make that left.
Yeah.
At
Yeah.
eight corners.
It's on your left.
Big
Yeah,
eight corners,
they're-
okay,
yeah,
so it'll be like across from eight corners and all the way to the,
Yeah, across
to
the
the
pizza,
corner.
whatever it's called.
And there was discussion about additional parking for Nonsuch River Brewing.
I'm getting there, guys, sorry.
Okay.
Can't imagine fitting that many buildings in there.
Yeah, agreed. It's hard for me to picture it too.
Just knowing that area, that land is so wet, with
Very
no
wet.
such right there, and I mean, it's floodplain, right, isn't it? River floodplain.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of, I don't remember what the map shows there, but I
How
remember
does
our
the-
maps are from 1986.
Oh, okay. Oh, great.
Oh,
yeah,
that was
go. Sorry, guys.
Okay, so this is an interesting view.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. So
All right, so
How
this
does
is the
that-
parcel right here that they're,
how,
52 acres.
How the heck are they gonna?
Right.
the blue outline.
The
Jamie,
blue
that
outline,
That whole piece, yeah.
yep. And
So how does that, sorry, folks, do we have just a few minutes to talk about this? Okay. How does so the proposal's been reviewed by town staff? against
They've
our
only
ordinances?
provided a sketch plan at this point. So it's very preliminary. And so Pete asked me to turn on the floodplain, so this is the preliminary
Okay,
floodplain, so they would be looking at probably filling that and building here.
mhm.
What, in that case, what do they need to do? Where do they mitigate? Mitigation bank, whatever.
Probably they would pay into the Maine wetland bank and mitigation would happen somewhere.
I mean, could this
They should have
commission,
that.
could one step for this commission be to assemble a list of questions to present to our town council liaison or the town council period?
So
Or
this, probably planning board.
Planning board,
Okay.
yeah, by the time it gets to the council,
yeah,
the
it's
recommendation
gone
is that it meets all the criteria of our ordinances and planning
Okay.
board has said. That it.
So that goes back to what Jamie was talking about. So we can weigh in on this, but if it
If
our
ordinance
it
all the
checks
ordinances,
boxes
it's just
and
gonna
meets
go
the
forward.
criteria, yeah.
And the developer apparently tried very, very hard to get that property owner the right. There's one house to sell.
Say that again, Pete.
Oh, that little nook right
Right
there.
there.
Right there?
They said, no way.
200, yeah.
Why, I'm not sure, but I said, no way.
Well, what would that give them?
I
A
don't know.
quarter of an acre. We don't don't know.
Maybe.
I wonder if it was just,
Parking
Half a
lot.
unit. I don't know.
or if that was how they
Parking
wanted
lot
to
and
access.
nonsense.
That's not just right
This
there,
is not such a, yeah.
Yeah,
I wonder if that's how they want.
which has
well,
created their
although
own problems with the runoff into the river.
so,
I was surprised at that, they built that so close to the river.
Parking lot's way too big.
so I'd like, I mean, I'd like to ask us to come up with some questions to bring to the planning board for this.
I agree, and I know the land trust looked at this parcel at one point.
Okay, and so Rita, could you, would you be willing to, work with us as liaison to maybe Scarborough Land Trust, if the Land Trust looked at this at one point?
Sure,
Questions that the Land Trust has about this?
sure. Happy to.
And then the planning board doesn't see a revision for several months, right?
Probably, I can see if they have an idea of when it may come back, and they said, and Eric was saying, you know, based on the site constraints, maybe it wouldn't come back. I can't imagine they would spend that amount of money on a property though, and just abandon their plans, so. It does sound like, from what they said during their first appearance in front of the planning board, is they develop a lot out of state. I don't know how much they've done in state, but they try to be sustainable, build sustainably, whatever that means. So I don't have enough information about who the developer is specifically, but that was mentioned that they try to use sustainable practices.
And Eight Corners is considered a development village for the town, so. All right.
But it also is adjacent to the Nonsuch River,
Right,
which is a goal of the town to protect. the core
Right,
of
yes,
the-
exactly, yeah.
So,
Right.
Sorry, those two things go against each other.
yes,
I see a problem here.
Are there any creeks flowing through the lot?
Well, there were, I don't know, creeks, but
there are small creeks on it that are tributaries to the.
Yeah,
To the,
Yeah, they're like, they're kind of like ditches with wetlands around them,
seasonal.
really. But they're,
Okay.
you know, they're about this wide. Small little things.
So, maybe everyone can send some questions to me and I'll collect them and then send them back out to everybody, or we can send, I think that might be easier than emailing all.
Increased setbacks. Not just setbacks, increased buffers.
Buffers, I can't remember.
I don't think we do. Something we really need to address in our ordinance. Something like the Nonsuch does not have increased.
Okay, and Emily needs to go and we need to wrap up soon
Sorry.
anyway. Thank you very much. Oh, Chuck, do you have to go too? Oh, you're waving.
No, I'm waving goodbye to Emily.
Okay, and Sustainability Committee,
I just gave you the
Okay.
update, just, we went
the
before,
EV charging.
yeah, one before ordinance, and we'll have a workshop with the full council at some point.
Okay. Anything that we didn't discuss that folks want to add to next meeting's agenda? It's been great. Thank you all.
Thanks for working on that plan.
Yeah.
yes, thank you.
Really helpful.
Mhm.
Okay,
Great.
well, see some of you on Wednesday night.
Yep, see you then.
So, try to be here. Thank you all.
Thanks.
All right.